Hey everybody, Melissa here, the Unlikely Hiker. I hope everyone is doing really good today. So back in August of 2017, I decided to go on a long trip with my son, Ethan. We went out to Scottsbluff, Nebraska to see the solar eclipse. We ended up driving about 3,400 miles round trip to Scottsbluff, Nebraska, where we saw the eclipse of all places in a Walmart parking lot. It really was an incredible journey. I had never driven so far in my life before, and I was thrilled that my son decided to come along with me for the ride. We saw a lot of really cool things along the way. I got to see a bunch of states I hadn't seen before, and it was my first experience in a desert-like area. It ended up being an absolutely amazing experience to see the eclipse, even though we traveled so far to do it. So fast forward almost 7 years, and Ethan and I were headed once again to see an eclipse. As luck would have it, even though I was planning to drive as far west as Indiana if I had to, it ended up being good weather, a little closer to home this time. I was watching the weather very carefully leading up to the day of the eclipse, and I ended up settling on Burlington, Vermont, even though every fiber of my being was saying, don't go there because of the traffic. The weather was forecast to be a little bit cloudy, and my friend ended up joining us for our overnight parking lot camping trip, and she was headed towards Jay, Vermont the next morning. So after talking to Ethan, we had the entire day to kind of pivot if we needed to, and we decided we were also going to relocate. Now on this particular trip, I did bring the trailer. The first time, we drove out in a 2-door Ford Focus, and that's what we slept in. So at least this time we had the convenience of the trailer. However, we did have to tow it no matter where we went. So I didn't really have a plan to relocate that day. I didn't have a good spot to park because that area of Vermont, there's not much. As luck would have it, we did in fact find a really cool pull-off on the side of the road, practically on the Canadian border in North Troy, Vermont. We really lucked out, and we had some really cool people around us that were also there to see the eclipse. There was a store across the street that had great food, drinks, bathroom. They also had Wi-Fi that reached across the street, so that made Ethan pretty happy. We found ourselves waiting in that parking lot, anxiously awaiting another eclipse. This one was going to prove to be even more exciting because totality was going to last longer than it did the first time. Back in 2017, I think we only experienced just under 2 minutes of totality, and it did seem to go by in a flash. This time we were expecting around 3.5 minutes, something like that. We lucked out with the weather. After first contact, when the moon first passes in front of the sun, it started getting dimmer and dimmer, and I always equated it to be like being on Mars, just further away from the sun. The way all the shadows get really dull. It's quite an amazing experience. I remember back in Nebraska in 2017, I felt the eclipse happening before I could see it, and I didn't really expect that, so I knew to look for that this time. There were a few ladies next to us, and they were very excited doing some kind of little science experiment things. One person made like a reverse telescope out of binoculars, and it was projecting the sun onto a piece of paper, which was very cool. You could even see the sunspots and everything, so we could see the moon passing in front of the sun that way. Another lady was putting her hands together like this to create little holes, and all the shadows were crescent shaped, and that was really awesome. It definitely was a fun atmosphere to experience the eclipse in. I did end up bringing my drone, my GoPro, and 2 cameras to the event, which I really thought was overkill, but I ended up having a few camera malfunctions, and I was unable to use my newer mirrorless DSLR camera, and I ended up using my 10-year-old DSLR camera that I used way back in 2017 to take some absolutely incredible pictures. So I was really thankful that I had that camera with me, although I did have some technical issues with that camera as well. It had been so many years since I had used it, I didn't remember how to fix the settings for it, and another person that was there had a Canon camera and they were trying to help me. I ended up rallying the camera settings in the last few minutes, and I was able to get a few pictures, although the ones I got back in 2017 with the same camera ended up coming out so much better. but I was able to take the time to just put everything down and look at the sun. My son is famous for telling me, Mom, just put the camera down and just look. Just pay attention, just be present. And he's not wrong, but as somebody that has ADHD, I really kind of need those pictures to help me remember. I was able to get a time lapse of the whole eclipse on my GoPro. Now, GoPro unfortunately isn't going to get the same kind of pictures that you would get just watching the eclipse, or a camera with a really nice lens on it, but it kind of gives a really cool idea of how the light it almost gets flat. I don't really know how to explain it unless you've experienced totality, but it just feels like Earth has been deorbited and it's just going away from the sun. It's kind of the best way I have to describe it, but it really is very cool. As totality happened, there was definitely a lot of hooting and hollering, and everyone was absolutely amazed. I distinctly remember just the briefest moments before totality when you see the diamond ring, and then boom, it was just dark, and it was just so exhilarating. It was as exhilarating, if not more so, the second time, because I knew how amazing this experience was going to be. It seems kind of silly, but seeing an eclipse and being able to understand the science behind it, it's still just a remarkable thing to see. And then to consider for a hot second what people may have thought eons ago before they knew what was going on. It's almost like the sun is just being swallowed up. I can't even imagine. I mean, talk about magic. The eclipse seemed bigger in the sky to me this time, and I think it's because last time when I experienced a total eclipse, the sun was higher in the sky. It was about noon, and it was August, and I remember it being big, but this time it just seemed bigger. And again, I'm assuming because the sun was lower in the sky, there was trees in the foreground, and it was just beautiful. It was absolutely stunning just to be able to stand there and stare at it as everyone started to freeze because it got so cold all of a sudden. After totality, the sun just seemed to come back so fast, and just like that, it was over. I suppose if I could get enough money to fly to Nome, Alaska, I could see the next one in 2033, but chances are I'll be waiting until 2044 for the next one and 2045 for the one after that. And already Ethan and I are making plans to go see those together as well. Some people might not think that it's a big deal to see an eclipse, but I'm here to tell you it really is a special event. And if you do get a chance in the future to see an eclipse, to travel to one somewhere else in the world, or wait another 20 years for one here, I'll tell you, don't hesitate. Go and see it because it really is amazing. I'll leave you with the time lapse that I took of the eclipse. I hope you enjoy it, and some of the photos that I'll throw in here as well. That's what I got for you today. Hope everyone is doing great. Take care. Bye-bye.